Right, I will start.
There we go. I see it.
Are you seeing my screen now?
I see your screen. It says recording.
Yeah, it says recording.
Okay. So here's the presentation that I wanted to give today, and I'll just go ahead and go through it. If people join in late, that's fine. And I'm also looking for a term. I try to think of one that captures what we're trying to do, and the best I could come up with was WASH Global Optimization. I don't really think we're quite there yet. That's not the exact term that I wanted, but it kind of captures what the issues are. So here are the starting problems. We've all talked about this. So, you know, and a lot of Rotarians have talked about this too. This is not something that's news. One, especially now with the need for the hydrologic studies, people who are doing individual projects don't have really easy access to key information about the needs and resources. And we can talk more about this, but I've had a lot of people contact me and said, hey, we need to know, we're going to Nicaragua or Dominican Republic and we're going to do this study, and Rotary International requires that we do these hydrologic studies ahead of time, and they don't have a lot of resources at their fingertips. And there are resources out there, but they're typically not easy to find. And so one of the things I think we can help with is getting those more available. The other thing that I've talked to people about is that Rotary seems to be doing a lot of work, but not necessarily in a prioritized way. If we think about the question, you know, how did we go about the polio issue, that there was probably some centralized planning to that, and a lot of the work that's being done now is along the lines of, okay, an international club will pick an area and they'll go there and they'll do a project, but it's not necessarily part of a bigger plan.
Do you want us to interject if we have comments, or would you rather we save them for the end?
We can just make it interactive. That's fine.
Okay. Because I was going to say, you know, along that point, one of the challenges is water sanitation hygiene is such a broad topic.
Right.
I mean, polio eradication is one clear thing. Even then it's complex, but you can include things like watershed management in the UK and you know, access to safe water in a developing area. That's a different can of worms. So it becomes much more difficult to set global priorities.
Mm-hmm.
And I would actually say that not only that, but unlike polio, there are 1,000 different ways to solve the problem. It's not just one vaccine.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that's clear is that, you know, polio was a difficult challenge, but global water and sanitation is much more difficult. And you know, even the solution, if you have vaccinated an entire village, you don't really need to go back there.
Right.
Unless there's an outbreak, you've done what you needed to do. Whereas with the WASH situation, there are a lot of sustainability issues that have to be maintained, hopefully up to the point where the culture has changed to the point where it is a common way to do things, and there's no need to follow up.
Well, I would actually argue that that WASH solutions have not been created with that intention in mind, that you don't have to go back. If you create it with an intention that you shouldn't have to go back to it, then that changes the way you're going to set it up, right? If you're going to create it in a way, it's the way we create our WASH infrastructure is exactly that. So, you know, with the community, you know, we're not going to be here. This is the last time we're going to give you money for this. So you got to tell us, you got to convince us how you're going to maintain this.
Right.
And they convince us of that before we even invest in the infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, essentially because of that, we have this crazy high success rate, right? 93% of our WASH infrastructure is working 15 years out.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Right. So if you don't have you either have to make sure that it's sustainable, regardless of the best way to do that is to make the recipient take on that responsibility for themselves.
Yeah.
And give them the resources and the education they need to do it.
Yeah, I just try and stay away from the buzzword because everyone uses the word sustainable and it means different things to different people.
Right.
But, like what you just said before was, you go into polio with the intention that once you've vaccinated this village, you're done. You don't have to go back there. And I'm just saying, use that same mindset to go in the WASH program. Once you go into it, you're done.
Right.
What does it look like after you leave?
Right.
Kind of thing.
Right.
That is sustainability. I just try and use the button.
Yeah. So the failure rate, we've all talked about that. And obviously if we have a high failure rate, then we're not getting the maximum benefit out of all the resources that are being put into this. And I don't know the number. I'm sure that the number is billions of dollars that have gone into WASH aid projects. And if half of them are failing, then that's a huge waste of resources. So those kind of go together. Here's some bullets that I put in the email. We don't even know the location of the projects we've done or whether or not they're effective. Some NGOs do track that. The only thing I know is that anecdotally, at least we know that some of them are not working. We don't know what our success rate is though. And that alone is, not a good situation. And there's my, my bullet about polio. We didn't randomly visit villages around the world and give out vaccines. It was a part of a larger project. A project was, how did you say it, Nancy? Nancy gave me she said something that really resonated, that every project should be part of a program. And that I don't think we are doing, but we can make it a part of a program. So, and then the third bullet there is, how does a club decide where to go? What is the priority? And what are even the diseases that are present that we're trying to, or I use diseases, what are the issues? What is the aspect of WASH that's needed? And in order to do that, you have to have some sort of an understanding in order to make those decisions. So I see we have another person joining here. I think Angela, I can't see her yet, but I see her.
I think just to comment on one of these points, I think they actually probably did start polio randomly visiting villages or regions, but it was bringing in those major partners who really have had deep experience with major health issues like the WHO and CDC and UNICEF. I think that also changed the game into a really organized, not to diss Rotary. I think Rotary did a ton.
Right.
But you know what I mean? I think picking partners is really critical to success. Picking
right. Yeah, and I think that Rotary will have to do that with the WASH issue as well. So, Angela, I see that you've joined the meeting. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, yes.
We just can't see you.
Oh, I apologize.
Oh, well, maybe that's okay. I don't know.
I'm learning.
Good morning, Angela.
Good morning. How is everyone?
Good.
Very well, thank you.
I apologize. I've never used Zoom before, so I'm learning.
We predicted that some people would be joining. So basically, if you can see my screen, that's kind of where we've been talking about. I think we all have a basic understanding of what the problem is. So we'll go to our objective. These are some of the things that I think our eClub could help with. The first bullet is the one that I thought I was going to focus on the most. That would be access to key information about the needs and the resources for a club to develop a good project. And
I agree. I thought so too. And
so as I have learned more about what's going on, there's other things that have kind of come onto this list. And the one thing that I want to really talk about today is global priorities. And I think that if we are going to be kind of a key player in helping Rotary have an overall approach, that we really need to think at that level first. And I have some kind of cartoons to take us through that, how that might work. The progress, we don't know, as I said on the previous slide, we don't know what Rotary has done. We don't know where we are making an impact and improving. So if we start with kind of a global priority list, we will have to track what we're doing in order to know whether we're succeeding or not. And then this fourth bullet kind of goes along with the second one, is if we know what the global priorities are, we can help get the projects directed towards where the highest need is that will give us the maximum benefit. And there are, within Rotary, there's a certain amount of flexibility that clubs have. So I have some ideas as to how we might be assisting rather than directing. And I'll try to get to that in a little bit later. And obviously the goal is that that individual projects not only are part of a overall program, but they have a really high success rate. So this is kind of my cartoon. This is a hypothetical continent. And you can see that I have countries shaded in different colors. And Neil, if you recognize this is kind of taking off of your Haiti model. So if a Rotary club says we want to do a project, and they just randomly pick a country, they might pick any of these countries. Whereas if they don't really have a reason to go to one country or another, they could look at this map and say, hey, there are 3 countries that really have a high need for WASH issues in this country, and maybe we should go there. So this would just be a way to help a Rotary club determine where the need is greatest and where they might want to go. And I have, the shading would be something that would take a lot of legwork but I have some ideas as to how we might do that. So this is kind of from the global level. We would be able to say, here is where in the world the need is the greatest. And then within that, if you click on a country, you get information about that country. And this is something we can add to. I will post this PowerPoint, and people can comment on it. But some of the things that we would want to know, okay, we picked country X. What are the WASH needs? Is it a water quality issue? Is it a water quantity issue? Or both? Are there hygiene issues that have to be addressed? It could be all of the above. And I think a starting point might even be UN, WHO, different NGOs that might know what are the disease rates in these countries? Where are the largest problems? So that from the very global scale, we would be able to say these countries are kind of our highest priorities. That doesn't mean,
just for a sec?
Yeah, let me just finish this point.
Finish your sentence.
That doesn't mean that the countries that are orange still can't have work done, because there's obviously within that country, there's going to be a need. So there will be clubs that say, hey, we want to go to this country because we have some connection there, but within that country, there will be somewhat of priority too. So go ahead, Nancy.
Oh, this is really interesting. One of the things, or a couple of things you'd want to add, I think, to that list are open defecation rates, maybe something like the type of sanitation technologies that are common. I'm curious whether it would be useful or how you'd even capture the level of government engagement with WASH issues.
Yep, I have a couple more slides on what would we want. So let me go ahead and go through them.
May I
Sure.
add in? So Nancy and I have been working on, Nancy, I, and Heidi have been working on the presentation to Rotary clubs, that we hope that the members of WASH will use. And so maybe some of this we can integrate, Nancy, into a dive deeper. A Rotary club says, hey, we heard your conversation, and now we want to know a little bit more about this. So, Bruce, if I understand you correctly, what you envision, because there is a thing on Rotary that you can actually go to the project page. While we have found that they're kind of reconstructing it, maybe this could be some of the stuff that we help Rotary International add to their stuff so people know what they're getting into.
Right. I think a lot of what I've seen on the WASRAG guidance is technology related. It's methods, definitely project related, and not necessarily kind of these overall background information.
Yeah, so that's kind of what we were navigating the other day is that, you know, there is WASRAG, and then there is actually a projects page in the Rotary, on the Rotary site. It's not seemingly connected to WASRAG. And Nancy, am I correct there?
Yes, the Rotary Ideas section.
Yeah, and so they actually have information. People are trying to raise money and such. So what I was thinking is that maybe we, in order to make it mile deep in a way, that we add in some information such as you're sending here.
Right.
Maybe a hyperlink of such.
I think whatever we do, we need to coordinate with Erica Gwynn probably at TRF or somebody at Rotary to see how to make it as available as possible. So, but that's kind of down the road quite a ways.
Yeah.
Like there's a ton of work to be done before we're ready to. Yeah. But yeah, Angela, I think you're right. It would be very helpful to have it available to Rotarians.
And so I think we have to kind of develop what it is that we want to do, and then maybe come up with an example of one. And then when people see how useful it is or could be, we can start filling in other locations. So this is kind of my second. I think I have 3 different groups of information I was hoping to have, where, again, so you picked a country. This is where I thought I would spend most of my time. I thought if we have this geologic maps and aquifer information, understanding drawdown and yields, we would know what would be a good source of water for a region. And for example, is groundwater even a viable option? I've had a few, projects that were sent to me, and I looked at the global drawdown maps, and I said, this area is already in severe deficit with respect to groundwater. I don't think that's a sustainable issue. So there's a whole series of help that we could provide just by adding this type of information, that people would not go too far down a certain road before they were to find that they were really not looking at a sustainable option. Yeah. And then the other thing that I think, if we have known or suspected contaminants, depending on the aquifer characteristics, that's one of the things I thought would be useful. You can tell certain aquifers are going to be susceptible to different types of contaminants, and that's definitely something that I was thinking about. So this is kind of your hydrogeology issue. This is actually, there's 4 one that we had here. So cultural, religious, and gender issues. when we found, if you've been paying attention to the Washington Women forums that we've had, this type of thing is something that I didn't expect, that is really a big part of it. I think the title of my email to a group of people was, this is more than drilling wells and putting in latrines, because there are reasons behind the lack of sanitation facilities, for example, that are cultural, that we don't necessarily understand. So some kind of, if we have anthropologists on this group, that would be a really good place to get that kind of input. And again, that varies within a country and among countries. So it's just something to consider if we can get it. So here's kind of what I think you were getting at, maybe, Nancy. What do we know about this country? Is the government cooperative? Are they looking at us as something that they're glad that we're there helping their citizens, or are we just an NGO who's kind of sticking their nose into things? Knowing the regulatory structure, whether we have to be permitted, how to go about that, who to contact, and then the concept of who do we know on the ground in that country. And especially when, for example, with these hydrologic studies, it almost has to be someone with local experience that we would contract with to do that work. And if you have, one of the strengths of Rotary is we are really well networked. If you don't know someone in a country, you can contact a Rotarian in that country and they'll know them. So I think that's one of the places where we really could benefit. And then the other issue I think we should be aware of, at least anybody going into a region, would be who else is working there. I have not seen, I know that on the club basis, Rotary does cooperate with other NGOs, and sometimes that makes good financial sense, but it also seems to be something that it makes sense for having more. A lot of other NGOs, we have Rotarians on the ground, but they're not necessarily the same as an NGO. Like, for example, Neil's group has been in Haiti for 20 years. That is going to be the kind of group that we want to make sure that we're in touch with and possibly partner with in our efforts. So those are some of the things that once you selected a country, and I, if you made some suggestions, and if you could just take notes and send me them, I can kind of add to this later.
It should be recorded, right?
This is recorded, yes.
So any comments we make would be recorded as well,
yep,
right?
Good point.
When we did the initial WASRAG site, not the very first one, but the next iteration, we put a map in. And the idea at that time was to get not just Rotary projects mapped, but all projects mapped, to encourage other organizations to come and map their projects so that you could go into a region and see exactly who is working in that region. Right. And MWater may be a vehicle for doing that. And I guess we'll figure that out when Neil talks to us. But we also tried to capture country information that was in a separate place. I think there are CIA country documents that you can access and that kind of thing. People didn't use them. So one of the things we have to be thinking about, I think, as we work through what we'd like to do, is how do you make this really user-friendly and not so thick with information that people just kind of go, oh God, I'm not going there. So it's just something to keep in mind as we think this through. Yeah,
well, the first thing I'd like to do is capture whatever we had before. And, you mentioned MWater. I think that's a platform that you can customize to whatever your specific needs are. So I think that would be, something we could look into. I don't know the details, but we don't have to reinvent the wheel. I'm
curious, there are a number of different mapping programs that are out there that different organizations are using. And I think people are sort of trying to figure out, is everybody going to go to one common platform so that information can be more easily shared and compared?
Right. Well, let me break in here. There's so much stuff flying around here. I mean, it's the first meeting about this stuff, so there's a lot of things to get out. Yeah. But to go back to Bruce's initial slide there about the stoplight color-coded intervention thing, probably the biggest and most standard measuring tool out there is the JMP progress towards the Sustainable Development Goals, the Joint Monitoring Program, which is the WHO UNICEF initiative that is measuring progress towards 6.2 and 6.4 of the Sustainable Development Goals, which essentially measure access to safely managed water and access to safely managed sanitation. I was at UNC last week with Danielle, who's not on the call here, and they presented their first round of data. I think their latest report came out in July. You have more than 100 governments from around the world reporting into this mechanism. So it's a pretty standard framework for deciding what's going on and deciding what you're doing. The tool, just in terms of measuring this. Now, I just want to separate that conversation about deciding and prioritizing interventions from all the details of how you start to approach that mechanism and filling in the holes in it. So I just wanted to peel those two conversations apart and let you guys know that the JMP progress is probably the best one out there and the most universal.
And so that would be, you know, kind of what I was talking about as a starting point. We don't have to decide that on our own. It's kind of already it's already in progress. Someone else has already done that work. We just have to make it available for people who are thinking about doing projects.
Yeah, and it's a very general set of goals that each government tailors to their specific needs, and both reporting needs, cultural needs, and social needs to fill in the holes there.
Mm-hmm.
So Neil, JMP gives you country level data, does it not? Does it drill down now into more detail? Because I think one of the things that Bruce is looking for is the detailed mapping. Here are the water points. Here are the.
Depending on how the government reports to them,
Yeah.
they are able to disaggregate that data down to a state level or a county level or whatever. Essentially, right now, because it's so new, it's only 2 or 3 years in, there is no universal, there's no country in the world that meets that anywhere.
Yeah. But there are other data systems like the Akvo Flow.
So that's separate. Now I want to shift. If you're going to talk about that, we'll shift over to the tool. The JMP is just a report, and it's a data flow framework that they're trying to standardize across the globe.
Right.
In terms of the tool that we use to collect that data, when we evaluated MWater 3 or 4 years ago, we evaluated about 30 different platforms, including Akvo Flow. There's a bunch of them out there. Fulcrum, I can't remember. There was 30 or so. We had about 15 or 20 different criteria that we evaluated them against at that time, including the ability to work offline, download maps and work offline, because in many of these rural countries you don't have cell phone access anywhere. Cost and ability to see what water points are near you, ability to update water points, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
After looking at all those together, we settled on MWater because it was free. Because it was free to use and had a lot of potential to develop it. Other groups have used Akvo Flow. That was one that we would have had to pay for them to develop dashboards. With MWater, we can develop our own. I'm not really hung up on MWater or Akvo or Fulcrum or whatever. I don't really care about the mechanism. What's really important to me is the way that we're looking at the thoughts and the flow of information around it. The tool will just be whatever tool it is.
But the advantage of choosing the tool carefully is that, excuse me, if we can find other significant players who are using the same tool, it makes it much easier to aggregate data, which can be helpful.
Yes, that's true. So in terms of aggregating the data and collecting the data, you have, there's a website out there called waterdata.org. There's a couple of them out there that are aggregating all that information. What we have found is that every partner in every country tracks different stuff, and they use different wording to measure different things. There is no universal standard for any of this stuff. There's very, very few standardized indicators. So when we created our reporting tool, we essentially, the way we got to that was to ask ourselves the question, how would we know when we won the game? How would we know when everyone had access to safely managed water and sanitation? And that basically said, well, we just said we'd have to know where all the water is, and we have to know where all the houses are, and we have to make sure that there's enough coverage. So we use a 500-meter buffer. There's countries that use a 1-kilometer buffer. Again, that's kind of a country-by-country standard for what we consider basic level access. If it's and the JMP calls that, if there's a potable water point within, I think JMP says a 30-minute walk of your house, including the queue time, then and it's managed sustainably, they call that basic level access. That's the second rung. What JMP is pushing towards, what they call safely managed water, is actually a water point in the house. So can I go to my map now, Bruce? Or
can I go through the rest of these? I know I kind of hope that you would follow. I'm going to leave off at the level of.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just go through these. So here, this is what I was talking about, where we can be assisting but not directive. And I think I've talked to other people about this. Some people will say, I want to go to Guatemala because we had an exchange student from there and I'm going back there. That might not be the most need in Central America, but if they do, then you zoom into that country and then you go to the next level. And so we don't tell them that they have to go to Honduras if Honduras is worse than Guatemala, but we say, okay, if you want to go to Guatemala, within that country, here is where you might want to look. And then the last bullet there, this is from Nancy. I don't know if you invented this, but this really resonated with me, that every project be part of a program. I'm pretty sure we're not there, but I think that would really help Rotary be able to say we're serious about this issue.
I think that just reflects really where Rotary's trying to go.
Mm-hmm. This is kind of how we will get this information. I think there's a lot of questions. We're going to start with a blank map, but a lot of that information has already been collected that we could just find, and then other organizations are tracking this. And then some of the things that takes legwork, I've thought about recruiting college students. If we're talking about the data, kind of go through records and help us understand what's going on in this particular country, and then we can pull that up to our site and have it available. The country level, we obviously have local contacts, and then the last bullet here is how it will be unknown at the very beginning. So this is going back to the continent level, and we're almost ready for you, Neil. So when you click on the country, I had it come up all orange, but in fact, an individual country, there might be part of it that's okay, there might be part of it that's on municipal water, and other parts that, so as you drill down, you go from the country issue in, and this would be kind of states or provinces within the country. So that is the last slide I had before I was going to turn it over to Neil. So I'm going to stop sharing if I can. Pause share. So you're not seeing my screen. Stop share.
There we go.
Okay, so now Neil, if you want to share your screen or.
Oh, wow. I might actually have to get off of this because I'm doing it in my browser. Hang on a second.
You should be able to share your browser window. Well, you should be able to share your entire screen, and then that will show whatever on your browser.
I wonder if I can do this.
At the top of the screen is where I found it, Neil.
At the top
No, mine it's at the bottom.
Yeah, on mine it's up at the top. So I don't know what kind of device do you have?
Oh, here we go. Here we go. I have a Mac, but
Yeah, me too. So it's in mine is at the top.
But I'm doing this in oh, here we go. Okay. Now, how do I share?
There should be a bar either at the bottom or the top.
It says share content.
But you have to put your cursor over it for it to show up.
Sorry. Okay, there.
It's
Let me get
okay.
this one up.
Yeah, there's a bar that shows up that has mute, stop video, invite participants.
When I click on share screen, I'm not seeing my my browser window.
We're not seeing your screen at all, so I'm not sure.
How do I do this?
Okay, well, I can share mine if you want me to.
Do you want to give her the website maybe? And
Well, he sent it to us.
yeah, do you want one of us to bring up the website and then you can
Yes.
talk us through it?
Why can't I do that? I wonder.
Bruce, do you have to give him some kind of permission?
That's a good question. Manage participants. More. I can make
Okay, can
the-
you guys see mine?
Yes, we do see that. I do.
Okay. Shoot. Well,
So you just hit the share screen button, Angela?
Yeah, so what I did was when you hit share, Neil, just when you get share, it's going to ask you to.
Oh, here it is. I got it now. I got
Website.
it. I think I had it. It's because I had it in full screen before, and it didn't show up in the list of things.
Okay.
So I got it now. Here we go. All right. My apologies.
Yes, we see it. Excellent.
All right. So what we did is, I'm going to answer a couple questions first. So I already talked to you about how would we know, who has access and who doesn't have access, and how do we distill that down into actionable items, actionable indicators? Because as Nancy said here earlier, there's so much data. It's really easy to get into a paralysis by analysis of the data, right?
Yes.
And so what we did is we basically said it comes down to 5 things. And for us, those 5 things are, is it functioning? Is water physically coming out of the tap? That means it's functioning. Is that water potable? In other words, does it meet criteria for being clean? And inside that, you can decide however you want potable to mean. Low conductivity, low salinity, E. coli, hydrogen salt, whatever you want, because everyone uses a different measure. So functional and potable. You need to know what the level of sanitation is in that area. Do all the houses have latrines? Is the well area itself clean? And so on and so forth. You need to know who's in charge of it. In other words, if there's something wrong with it, who do you call? And last but not least, you need to know when the last time anybody looked at it. So if somebody last looked at that well 10 years ago, then I'm not going to give much value to that data. But if it was this month, they said it was broken, then that gets a lot more interesting. So with those 5 kind of standard indicators, and you could develop those however you want, but it gives you a standard set of things that are very actionable. Is it functioning? Let's get it working. Or is it not? Is it potable? What do we got to do to treat it? Nobody's in charge of it? Okay, let's get somebody in charge of it. They're all very actionable things. And that was in the very first map that I sent you earlier this week or last week, the Frappe website. Those 5 letters in Haitian Creole spell out the word frappe. And in Haitian Creole, if something is frappe, that means it's kind of working, banging all cylinders. It's like it's hitting on all cylinders. It's really working. So we use that acronym here in country to help drive the conversation forward. Talk about the pieces that are missing. So when you look at that first website, that's what it is. Now on the screen that you're looking here, we're only registering 2 of those indicators. and that's just functioning and potable. Here you can see an aggregated map of the country and the areas of the country that we've mapped. We've mapped all these, and you see, as Bruce said, kind of a stoplight, 5-color map that shows town by town which towns are best off and which ones are worse. The red ones being 0 to 10% of the houses have access, the blue ones being more than 75% of the houses have access. We can click on any one of these towns and see that, like in Peon, where I live, there are 10,332 houses. 66% of the people have access to functional potable water within 500 meters of their house. Oh, and I can click on any one of these towns and get a similar thing. Here, the town of Valier, only 10% of the people. As you zoom in on that map, you'll start to see much more detailed information, including every house. The black dots are every house. The green lines are water systems, and these numbers coming up are the individual water points. These are springs, boreholes, kiosks, water systems, whatever. Green means functional and potable. Yellow means it's broken, and red means it's not potable. So as I zoom in more, you can see a little more detail. You can start to see more clearly the buffer around each area. I can click on any one of the points and see what it is. This is a spring. There's a picture of it. It's clean. It's not clean, but it's got water coming out of it. And there are 25 houses within 500 meters.
How did you get the house data? Were you able to pull that off of some other map, or did you have to actually put in GPS for each house?
So for the housing layer data, we actually pulled the maps off of Google Earth and sometimes Bing, and then started with ArcGIS actually clicking on every house. Click, 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 click.
Wow.
So we got about 1/10 of the country done, and then found out that the government had already done that. So we just bought the rest of the layer from them.
Good.
It took about 3 days or 4 days to do every town. We separated it off into grids and just had somebody work on that. The gray circles here are areas where there is no data on whether the water is potable or not. In other words, the water has not been tested.
Okay. So that buffer is 500 meters, or what is that buffer?
The buffer is 500 meters.
500 meters, okay.
Yeah, if you look at the legend, it says water access within 500 meters.
Right, right. And if somebody has a non-potable source but has household water treatment?
So let me go on, because
Okay.
this is just introduce this. So this gives you an idea of the scale, where you want to work. So for instance, I showed you Peon before. I'm going to click across the tabs on this. So the next tab is a commune overview. So when we do this, in order to create a sustainable and durable intervention, it's not something that we can do ourselves. We have to have multiple actors aligned around this in order to make it work. Oh, for us, those actors are the government, the National Water Office, who has a responsibility for this working, and the regional and local elected officials. So when we create this map to gather the data, we actually start through the National Water Office, and they introduce us through their hierarchy of communication to the local and regional elected officials. We have a meeting in the town, and we say, okay, we're going to know all this information. We all need to work together to do this. We send our guy out, but he goes out with the mayor's office or with a representative of the mayor's office to visit every one of these points. When it's done, we print out a big map and hang it on the wall in the mayor's office and validate all that information with the local community, whoever's interested. And they have an opportunity to say, oh, no, there's another spring here, or you forgot this well, and there's water over here, and no. And so, you know, it's not 100%, but it is validated by a huge number of people. Then we actually start looking at the map as a group and say, okay, now here's Peon. Let me just zoom a little bit more on this. Oh, you're not going to be able to see the whole town here, but you can see pretty quickly that the yellow ones are broken. So they actually get on the wall with a marker and start drawing circles on it. We got to fix this one, and we got to fix this one, and we got to fix this one. And then these red ones, we got to get clean, and we got to get this one clean. And they just keep track of them on the side, counting them. Okay? Then, when they got all those captured, they know that they have 18 ones that they got to get cleaned up, and they have 17 or whatever that they got to fix. Then we have another overlay that's a population density overlay. And we use this tool because what we've found is that there's a break point in economics that it becomes more efficient to talk about a water system once you have more than 100 houses per square kilometer. That population density, it becomes cheaper to run pipe to everyone's house usually than to do individual wells. And so these red areas, the red squares, are areas where there's more than 100 houses per square kilometer. So they go in here and they say, okay, look at this area here. Let's do a feasibility study for a water system here. And this one down here, here's another one. Let's do a water system design down here. And here's another one over here. And here's one over here. So they know here in Pio that they've got to do 5 water system studies. Then the yellow areas are areas where you have 25 to 100 houses per square kilometer, which is essentially the number of houses that can be serviced by a borehole with a hand pump. And so that kind of overlaid on this map where there isn't any, where there's empty spaces, becomes the number of new boreholes. How many new wells do we have to do? And when we do those new wells, you still have the white areas. That's where you have fewer than 25 houses per square kilometer, where you talk about household water treatment or something else, because it's not enough houses to be able to maintain a hand pump. All those things together become part of the communal action plan. And on the map here, you can see all the blue areas of the map are where we have to do interventions. And what are those? Right now, currently, Pion has 66% of the houses have access. And according to the plan, if we do 5 feasibility studies, 51 new boreholes, 1 spring cap, and 1,000 household water treatments, 100% of the people will have access to water. And what are those interventions? Well, they're listed here. There's how many kiosks we have to do, how many fountains, how many wells, how many springs, and so on and so forth. And at the bottom, they're prioritized according to population density, how many houses they serve.
What are you calling a kiosk?
A kiosk is a water point where people would walk up and pay, not just a water flowing thing.
Okay.
They go up and have to pay and get a bucket of water. So you see that here. So now to get to Nancy's thing about how a plan becomes a project, we actually have an ongoing project right now. We just started last month with Rotary International and the Rotary Club here in Pion, whereby we have money to do 46 of those 51 boreholes. Hey, Oli, I'm sorry guys, I got my kids running around here. Go outside and be quiet. And we've engaged 16 of those, and we don't have any inaugurated yet. So what do we still have to do in Pion? You can see at a glance, we still need money for 6 more boreholes, 4 more feasibility studies, and the household water treatment.
So the areas where you felt it was worthwhile to do in piped water system, is that something that the local economy can support, or does that have to be supported from outside as well?
Well, the interesting thing about that is what I learned at UNC is that there is no answer to that question.
Okay.
And in fact, the government here in Haiti doesn't really have a solution for a managed water system here. You can see here I have the Pion water system on the list. We just engaged with the government now to look at the Pion water system and begin to introduce the language and technology that we're using to manage the boreholes into the water system here. So we're trying to bring all the pieces of this together to make a package that they can then expand across to all the water systems in the country. A management package. So we also have what's this? I'm sorry. This doesn't. Oh, there it is. Here you can see at a glance how many. Right now we have 18,500 water points we've surveyed. You can see where they are across the country. 9,000 of those have water quality tests. Those are E. coli water tests. To go back to Bruce's earlier thing, we also, while we're doing the mapping, we actually create a groundwater potential map. This is what that looks like. And this is done by a professional hydrogeologist. And it shows us at a glance which areas of the country you can find water, potable water within 100 meters of the surface. 100 meters being the level of a bore, essentially a borehole with a hand pump. So we overlay that on when a community makes a request of us. That's not working. That page is dead. But basically, we lay those over the dots here, and we can see at a glance the red areas are areas where we'd have to get a geologist to come do a study. Green areas, we can go ahead. Blue areas, we can go ahead and drill without really any risk. So just to keep it up on a higher level, we're working now to create these action plans for all the towns that we've mapped in the country. We've mapped about a third of the country here now. We only have action plans for 2. So, I don't know. I can go into a nauseating amount of detail.
It's really interesting.
Yeah, it really
a
is.
lot of-
I need to sign off, but it's like so interesting.
So we also have lots more stuff here. Let me see what else I have open. This is a dashboard that we use for donor generosity.org, funded 5 wells with us in the last year. This is a link that they can go to on themselves and see. You can see here as of October 12th at 12:05 p.m. They did 5 wells with us. That covers 210 homes, 1,100 people. 80% of homes are subscribing to the well, and the committees are 61% women. 100% working, 100% managed. 99% of the houses have sanitation, potable, and inspections. Here's the revenue in goods. So far, those 5 communities have collected and saved 37,000 goods. So they've got about $500 in the bank.
So Angela has a question before she leaves. That is, what are there any expectations of? Is there a to-do list that we're going to take home from today? Do we have any action items other than let's do this for the rest of the world?
Other than that. Well, that would be a good conversation to have. I mean, there's certainly a lot of pieces floating around here. I think that if it was me, I would start to take on some of these things. I think that a hybrid solution of what Bruce has laid out and what I've laid out, I think that there's probably a step-by-step list of the interactions that you need to do in each country. It probably starts with some government engagement to the National Water Authority that pushes the creation of a survey like this where you get all this on one platform. And then the creation of action plans. So and then inside that, the hydrogeology information and be able to manage the aquifers and so on and so forth. And Bruce and I have talked about that offline. Don't have it together yet.
I guess my question is more centered around, so I'm still focused on the how our club is going to help other clubs. And so forgive me for continuing to beat this horse. But the first thing that we're working on is this presentation. And I just want us to be able to, I think part of the presentation, we will give people this, oh yes, we want to be involved, but we have to, I want us to be able to direct them in ways that is cogent and useful, so they don't, we don't lose ground with not being fully thoughtful in our approach. So I was just wondering if there was opportunity for easy things that we could add to the presentations of after the first presentation of people who say, oh, we're ready to do a water project. Where do we go next?
I think to a certain extent, we don't have, we know what we'd like to do, but if someone comes to us and says, hey, we're going to this country, where's this wonderful plan? We don't have it yet. So a large amount of the work is theoretical at this point.
So yeah, to get down to the point of that, Angela, I think from the way that we approach it, I would need to have action plans for every one of the communes on this map, where a Rotary Club could say, oh, you know what, I work down here in Mirebalais, and I would like to do something in Mirebalais. So show me the action plan for Mirebalais.
So, and Neil, and what I hear you saying then is that if you're going to do something with this, you would think the first step would be an action plan.
Yes. So, and this is a new thing. So we're just creating this now. We have 46 towns mapped here. We only have action plans done for 2 or 3 right now. So within 6 months, we'll have the rest of the action plans done here. One of these towns, the reason I said it that way was because Mirebalais was where the group of engineers, what do they call it? Engineers for developing countries out of Clemson University. They work down in this area, and they want to use this tool and the action plan for that town to do their interventions.
So the other part of this is, I mean, we've talked about scales from the individual house and street level up to the world. So maybe one of the other take-home issues could be identifying people within our club who might be able to start gathering some of the more national scale issues and help us get started at that level.
I agree.
Yeah, I think we need to have 2 things. We need to look at all the pieces of this necessary for each country. We need to decide if this is the tool we want to use or another tool. I'm not really beholden to MWater. I just use it because it works for us and it's free. But you can see the concept of it, of how we would do that. You know, so in terms of us for Haiti, you know, we want to get to the point where we've mapped the whole country. And so it becomes a national tool for the country with partners enrolled in that. To do that, to that end, we're working with Rotary International and Ron Denham and a group of bigwigs we're going to have a workshop here in Haiti in January with the government and the Prime Minister to look at what this might look like as a national tool.
So Neil, how would you share this tool with other organizations that are working in Haiti?
Well, you know, what makes it powerful is that, you know, if you're out here in the field and you have the MWater tool on your phone or your iPad or whatever else, that you're able to look up the water point closest to you and provide a report. You know, it just shows up on your phone and here's the closest one. So all this information now that you're looking at is a little more than a year old. You know, it just hasn't been updated regularly, except for the ones that we've physically done. So as right now, it's getting older and older and older. Well, we have to create a national program where these water points are getting visited on a regular basis, quite frankly. We can't do that as Haiti Outreach. Only the government can be responsible for that.
So I think embedded in that question was, if a NGO is going to work, they have access to everything that you have done, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, all this is done. Everything, this is all online. It's all available on that Frappe site. Yeah, my son is wants my attention here. So yeah, this data is all available. That's the whole point of MWater, is that it's an open platform. We do have the ability to control some of the data, so we don't make it all public. Like we capture really detailed, like 15 or 18 different parameters for water quality, the phone number of the guy in charge, and so on and so forth. So we don't make all that public on the public website. But if you sign up and you have a reason to have information, we can make it available to you.
But also, you're going to want to control who could input information, because you want some credibility in that data. So how would you do that? Like,
so what happens is if somebody, you could now go in at any one of these water points, if you were in the field, and provide a report to one of those. So what happens is it shows up on our dashboard as a new report.
Yep.
But it doesn't go into the public side until we actually validate it or truth it. So there's actually a button we can click to say, okay, this is part of the data set or not part of the data set.
Okay. And part of the decision to approve it would be based on, like, how would you know? What would make you feel comfortable approving it?
Oh, well, it would depend on what it was. If it's functional status, if it's a not potable status, we'd have to know who it was. If it was just a person, we'd probably
some random tourist, you might not be so keen.
Right, but it would still be part of the MWater data. It just wouldn't show up on this dashboard because it's only the validated data that shows up here. It would show up on a different dashboard that we would use to truth that.
Okay.
So, in other words, we use this. I have something here that might show that. We use this tool also to track partner participation. So we use this to, it's really kind of slow. Let me reload the web page. We want to have the local elected officials there. We want to have the Rotarians, the local Rotarians there. We want to have the national water officials there. We want to have people at these meetings with the community, because it's a really large conversation. I don't want to just have the pastor in this community be the one that's running everything. We want to have everyone involved that needs that authority. Mm-hmm. So we track their participation meeting to meeting and see who's been present and who hasn't. And if it ever loads here, if you ever loads here, you'll see that actually the local Rotarians have only been at like 2 out of 60 meetings.
Yeah.
And the national water officials have only been at 7 out of 60 meetings. So I don't know why it's not working, guys. I'm sorry.
So Neil, Festus joined us. He's from Ghana, and I don't know if you've met him before.
Festus, welcome.
Nancy.
Yeah, thank you.
I was wondering if you just kind of missed a part of the demonstration, Festus. Just to kind of go over what we've talked about. I talked about how we could kind of get a global map of where the biggest problems are with respect to water and sanitation, so that Rotary clubs could have some way to prioritize. And then Neil works in Haiti, and he just demonstrated his maps that he's made. And I wonder, we just saw it, but if you want to go over it again for Festus, I wouldn't mind seeing it again. Just kind of briefly go back through your map.
That's great. So I
Plus
just want
you're recording this, right? So
yes,
Festus could also listen.
You can go back and look at it again. But I'll go back in a second. So here you can see quickly for this Rotary Peon project, we started in September. We had 17 meetings in September. 16 times the president was there. The treasurer was present 16 times. The TAPOC, which is the local level water official, were present 0 times. The ASEC and CASEC and ASEC, the elected officials, were never present, and so on and so forth. If I scroll over here, Rotary Club has not been present, nor have the Rotaracs for any of these projects. But in October, we had the TAPOC, the National Water Official, present at 9 out of 70 meetings. And we can tell at each community who was present at each community. These are on the left here is the list of every community that we're engaged in. And you can see who was present at those meetings. So it's a powerful tool for transparency.
So you focus mostly on water, or are you doing sanitation as well as an organization?
So as an organization, we're all about Haiti being a developed country. And for us in a developed country, everyone has access to water and sanitation. And what that revolves around and how it shows up is actually having people be responsible for that. So while water is what shows up for most people, what's really in the background is this conversation about responsibility. And that's really what drives the power of our conversation. So in other words, when I did more than 1,000 wells across Haiti from 1989 to 2004. And in 2004, I sent a guy out on a motorcycle to see how many were working.
Yeah.
Basically, only half of them were working.
Yeah.
We had done everything that everybody used all over the world. We'd trained technicians. We'd set them up as businesses. We'd done this. We hired a guy to do it and gave him a four-wheeler, gave people parts, sold people parts. There's a long story about that whole thing. But when I looked at that data, I went, you know what? This is a management issue, not a technical issue. And we changed our game to start treating it as a management issue. And that's where that conversation of being responsible, transparent, and acting with authority. And essentially overnight, we jumped from 50% working to 90% working.
Yeah.
And from 2005 to today, we still have 93% of our infrastructure working. On top of that, because communities were getting responsible, like 95 or 99% of the houses build latrines. So 95 or 99% of the houses, when we leave, actually have latrines. And because it's not us building them, it's just that they're getting responsible in a way that they know they're responsible for it.
And are they generally pit latrines?
They're generally pit latrines, yes.
And is there a system for emptying, or what do they do when they're full?
So now you start to brush up against the SDG and JMP goals for sustainably managed sanitation.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, I can't answer that question now. These are mostly rural areas, and I don't think there's that much usage. So I think, according to the JMP, they would call those sustainably managed as long as they're not being emptied or they're digging new ones.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't have any data on that.
Yeah. Okay. Where does soil work in Haiti? Is it in your area?
Yeah, soil works on the north coast in the town of Cape Haitian.
Okay.
And I know Sasha very well. I've known her since she started soil, quite frankly. It's a pretty cool program, and they've got more data on that composting stuff than anybody else.
Yeah.
But they haven't quite got the economics down. It really works in high density urban populations.
Yeah. Yeah.
Once you get outside of that, it's a little bit tricky.
Yeah.
So, when coming out of that conference at UNC last week, we realized that there's a lot more of the conversation we have to fit into it to meet the SDGs for sanitation. So.
Yeah, it's a big topic for sure. Just as an aside, last week while you were at UNC, I was briefly in New York and spent some time at Charity Water and had a really interesting conversation with a fellow there that I met. But they've developed a sensor that can go into either an Aphrodite pump or a piped water system. Are you familiar with this?
I am, yeah. So they've got two. One of them, the one that works on a hand pump, was actually developed by some friends of mine.
Okay.
But the other one that is a remote water meter, we actually had one of theirs down here that we tested. We've been testing.
And how did you find it?
Well, it's pretty cool. All the data goes to Charity Water. So it's an interesting tool to build into it. From our perspective of communities being responsible, you have to manage it really, really well. Because imagine Charity Water set it up so that they could know if this well in Africa was functioning or not.
Right.
So imagine this conversation now that this guy wakes up in New York and he's having his coffee and he sees the well is down out there in Uganda. And so he sends an email to the guy who's supposed to fix it, and that guy goes out and fixes it. That would be really cool to have that kind of oversight. But look at it from the community level. All they saw was their pump was broken, and then somebody came to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, this is cool. I'm just going to sit and wait. Less responsible for the well in that conversation if you don't manage it properly.
Yeah.
So just to back up a little bit, this sensor, is this just a flow meter that's telemetered to transmit data?
Yeah, it's essentially a flow meter with a small cellular data upload. So it uploads through the cellular network.
It's got a battery that lasts for 10 years. It will work with any cell system, apparently. Like they'll work all over the world.
Yeah, and it reports into that. I think it uploads it to like a Google Sheets program.
Yes, so you go to the web and get your data. I mean, if you're running a circuit rider program, for example, and the community is paying a fee for that, it would just be a really easy way to get, data on is it functioning or not.
Yeah, so it's a really cool tool. They were supposed to test them out in Nepal, and then when the earthquake happened in Nepal, they couldn't do that. So they contacted us to do some of the beta testing for that.
Yeah, he said they have 1,000 functioning right now. So.
Sorry, somebody else. Right.
Anyway, that was an aside. There's just so many interesting tools being developed, and it's, you kind of try to evaluate. And
yeah. So Charity Water pulled out of Haiti because they had some pretty bad experiences here, not with us, but with some other organizations.
Oh, did they?
Yeah. So they're not working in Haiti anymore, other than that they had us test those sensors for them. Well,
with this tool, maybe you should go back and talk to them.
Met with them at the conference.
Sorry, you were garbled there.
Pretty.
Your signal's going in and out, Neil.
Oh, all right. Let me know when it comes back.
Yeah,
I hear you now.
Okay. So I actually did meet with them at UNC. And we talked a little bit. They were pretty excited about this. It's not rocket science. It's really just a high level of intention and applying a tool in a way that you want to use it. It's really just simplifying the conversation.
And they seem to be all about being able to connect donors with results. So this kind of information I would think would be something that would really appeal to them.
Yeah, it really is. So I had I'm looking for the generosity one here. So yeah, for instance, generosity here on this, that's not just this summary information, but there's actually a map that they can click on here and see their wells and where they're at in the country, right? And actually click on it and see a picture of their well and how many houses it serves. They can see their local.
Wow.
And stuff like that. So this one serves 33 houses, 108. So,
yeah.
And this is a different one. Oh, I see there's a breakdown on the pop-up here. It has two different numbers. I think the first number is the number of households, and the second one is the number of people.
Oh, okay.
3 households and 512 people.
Right, that makes sense.
So
this is great. It's a great tool. If you can get the data in, it's a great tool.
Yeah. So, yeah.
So could you just go back to the kind of the highest level and show Festus, since he came in right after you were showing that?
Certainly. So Festus, what we did was, here, this shows how much information we've collected here. Let me go to this point here. We've collected around 18,000 water points across about a third of the country of Haiti. That includes every spring, capped or uncapped, every well, every water system, every fountain, any place anyone gets water. And here is an aggregated map of that shows at a glance how many houses have access to potable, functional water within 500 meters of their house. So this is summarized information. One of the things that we have to do to kind of make this tool better is that this aggregated information is we actually do that offline and then upload this layer to MWater. So, one of the things that we have to fund the development of this in MWater is that this gets automatically calculated. The access is automatically calculated.
Okay.
But you can click on this and see for Hench, for instance, there are 34,792 houses. 34% have access within 500 meters. Maysad, 15,000 houses, only 8% have access.
Wow.
So the reason I wanted to kind of show you this again, Festus, is because this has been developed for Haiti, but a question would be for for implementing this kind of approach in another country would take quite a bit of work. But I'm curious as to what you think of this approach, because the way I started this today was a Rotary Club may randomly decide to go to a specific country and a specific village to do a project. But with this type of approach, a Rotarian in somewhere in Nebraska who is looking to do a project could see where a project was needed. And then if they wanted to go to a specific province where the need wasn't high, there's still locations within that area that have a need. So it would help with priorities, both in selecting a country that had a high need, and then within a country, what the area was with the greatest need for WASH projects.
So
Yeah.
you can see,
I feel it to form a very good basis for, like you said, for any project to kickstart. It's a very wonderful tool here. I'm just looking at. I think over time I love to see how working with it will be fun. But I'm still looking at it. Probably maybe we'll catch up with it, and I think it's a good thing we can implement here also in Africa, if it's possible.
So you have a lot of knowledge about what's going on in Ghana, and the question is, it might take a lot of work to get to the level of detail that Neil has done, but even if we could get down to maybe the province or whatever your local regions are called, someone who wanted to work in Ghana, could you help direct them to a place that was where the need was greatest, or would that be something that would take a lot of work to get to?
For now, we can get something, but not as detailed as what Neil is doing here. What he's done here is something else, So we can give you other data, okay, but it won't be as specific as he's been able to capture here, okay. Yeah.
So would you be able to help someone, for example, say, here are the regions in Ghana that have need for specific WASH projects?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, we can. Yeah, it's possible. We can direct. We can pull out some data.
This
data.
It is possible to upload data. I mean, as you can see here on the map, the colored data is the data that we've collected. The gray circles are actually legacy data that we got from the government.
Okay.
Those aren't part of the 18,000 that we've collected, but it is data that's out there. It just doesn't, they're gray because the E. coli test.
Okay, that means you can input raw data and already collected data. Like what you've collected here. It consists of field and then desktop data, right? Or you always have to go to the ground to collect the data to be able to, create a map like this. Or you can use existing data.
It depends on how accurate the information was when it was collected and what format it's in and what indicators they used to select that data. And so it takes it takes quite a bit of time to incorporate new data, and that's partly just because everyone has a different way of communicating. You might measure potability, for instance, using a hydrogen sulfide presence absence test, and somebody else uses the Aquajenks E. coli test, and somebody else uses residual chlorine as a potability measure. So, you know, when you talk about potability, there's kind of all these indicators all over the map. And within those indicators, everyone has different thresholds for saying potable and not potable. The data that comes at you might just say potable. You don't have any idea how they measured it.
Okay.
So, you know, part of it is actually getting aligned as you do this, getting systematic and getting aligned as this data comes in, that we collect this data in a very systematic way. So,
Okay.
Nancy, are you gone, or you just turned off your camera?
Oh, I'm going to leave shortly.
Oh,
Yeah, sorry, I have to, yeah. It's Saturday morning here, so you know.
and here too. Yeah, I have to get back to some other stuff too. So.
Yeah. But really great meeting and fantastic work, Neil. I'd love to talk with you more about it. So.
Yeah, well, anytime. And Bruce, I think all of us together have to do some more brainstorming about
Yeah.
how we get systematic about this.
Mm-hmm.
And what do we need to do? What are all these pieces put together? Maybe it's just as simple as an outline of the different steps that get you to this point,
Mm-hmm.
and we just start to flesh it out. I think that this group, our eWash Club, is the group to do that. We have incredible international experts on every aspect of water and sanitation and hygiene. So, let's put it all together, rock the world.
Mm-hmm.
Good move. Okay, I'm going to jump off. Talk to you guys soon. Thanks
Bye.
a lot,
Thank you.
Bruce, for organizing. Bye.
Bye. Welcome.
So Festus, do you have any other comments or questions about?
I'm rather enjoying what Neil is presenting. So probably as it's recorded, I'll take my time and look at it again, and
Yeah,
see going forward.
you can
I was thinking,
you can both look at the website and you can look back at the video. We'll post this video on our internal website, and I'll send a link out so you'll be able to watch the whole presentation.
okay, really appreciate that if I get it,
Yeah, and Festus, don't be afraid to contact me offline anytime. Just send me an email, and if you have questions about it,
Okay.
let me just chat my email to you.
Okay.
Oh, I got the chat there.
Okay.
How about that?
Okay, Neil.
So really, like I said, this level of detail took several years of work and kind of a long, it's not something that we're going to have for every country. That's going to happen shortly. I don't know what the government in your country has, if they have data that's reliable that would help us. We talked about, a lot of issues. One is how cooperative the government would be for, Rotarians to come in and start asking these questions about their data. If they knew that the goal was to try to fill in gaps where there was a need. So that would be one question. There's a lot of work that has to be done to get to that point. So,
Right.
So to that, I think we can write a proposal to that. It wouldn't be a bad one because it's a good thing. This not. It will even help the government, in decision making and stuff. So I feel it wouldn't be a problem at all if you like to, but as Rotarians here or anywhere in Africa here, I don't feel it would be a problem at all. Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. So I think, Bruce, what do we got, 4 or 5 people now? That's a lot more than 2.
right.
Right? So I think over the next couple of weeks, we'll just try and put together an outline.
Okay.
Of some of the steps that incorporates it, and then just start kind of putting it in order and seeing where the gaps are.
All right. Do you want to start the outline of that, or?
I will.
Okay.
I will. Give me a week. Give me a week or
Okay.
so. Yeah, I should have time to do that this week, I think.
Okay. And there are people who couldn't make it today who wanted to, so we'll make this video available to them and allow them to pitch in too and give their input.
Hmm. Sure, anytime. And anyone can email me with more stuff. So, do we have a Google Drive thing? Share a document?
We don't. I think we should probably get one. We have a Dropbox that we can use. It's not quite the same, but we can share files through that.
All right, let's look at that offline too, Bruce.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be a good way to share, progress and
That would solve
documents.
the calendar issue too. So.
Well, we have the Google Calendar.
Yeah. So.
I don't know if that's not an. I don't know if that would be associated with a Google Drive or not. I'm not sure how that works.
Yeah, maybe.
No. Let's just look at that.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be Google Drive. I don't mind using Dropbox, but having a Google document.
Yeah, I think that's a good.
Start with Dropbox. That's all we need.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much, guys. I'm going to stop sharing here. Sorry it took me so long to get my act together on that.
Okay. Well, I think that's the agenda that we had for today. We've had a good interaction, and I appreciate everybody joining. And Festus, thanks for joining in. Hopefully, you can see what we discussed the rest of the time and give us your feedback.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. It's been a short while I joined. I've enjoyed myself.
What time is it, Festus?
Come again.
What time is it in Ghana?
Oh, it's about 6 p.m.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, almost 6 p.m. Yeah, 6 p.m. Yeah,
Awesome.
We have 4 hours ahead. Yeah, from that.
Well, one good thing is to actually just get to interact with other club members. The more we can do this, the better. I think this, email is a way to arrange things, but to really communicate, I think we just have to get on here and talk and keep doing this. So thanks for joining.
Yeah, it's
All
wonderful. Yeah.
Look
Thank you,
forward to
guys.
talking to you all again.
Bye-bye.
Okay, I think that's
Bye-bye.
it.
Yeah.
Bye.
Yeah, bye.
Bye, Neil.